And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sarah DeVello, and I am so incredibly honored to host the legend herself, Ms. Ann Perry, joining us live from an undisclosed location in LA, here to tell us about her brand new book, 3 Debts Paid. Ann, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Thank you very much indeed. Oh dear, have I got an echo?
No, there's no echo.
Oh, good. Well, I wrote it so long ago that I had to look at the cover to remember what it was all about, because the first cover they had was quite beautiful, but she was wearing a straw hat and a muslin dress. And this is London in February. And every Londoner knows it rains all February.
Exactly.
But I wanted to explore a series of killings that, when you know everything about it, it's totally understandable. But you have to reach there step by step by step, and it gets more frightening and uglier and closer to home with each new crime. The people that don't appear to have anything that connects them at all, and they're found one by one, slashed and left on the pavement in the rain.
Ooh, well, yeah.
Privately, Daniel and Miriam are having an increasing depth to their relationship. I won't tell you how it ends, but I think you'll like it.
Yeah, don't tell us how it ends. No spoilers here on Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Now, I am also pleased to be hosting the incredible author, writing teacher, and Anne's editor, Ms. Victoria Zackheim, here to tell us about her writing, her career, her latest book, and what it's like to work with Anne. So, Victoria, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens as well. Also joining us from an undisclosed location in California. Tell us about your latest book.
Well, my book came out right in the middle of the pandemic. So it was one of those books that people said, oh my God, I love it. But it came and went. It was all of the events around it, BoucherCon, everything was all canceled. So it was a very sad beginning. But Private Investigations was a great deal of fun for me because I was able to go to 20 of the top mystery writers in the country, Ann Perry included, and say to them, write about your own personal mystery. What is it about your life that has happened that's a mystery? So, between Jeffrey Deaver and Anne and Robert Dugoni and Caroline Levitt, and it was such a wonderful cast of extraordinary writers. We put together a really wonderful anthology. And of course, editors always ask the same question. Aren't you afraid that all the stories are going to be the same? If you have one theme. I said, trust me, I could do an anthology on a hangnail on my thumb and ask 100 writers to write about it, and you'll get 100 very different takes on the hangnail. So, as always, they came in with extreme...
I can second that.
Yes.
I found it very interesting to read because most of them I did not know, some of them I did, but they were devastatingly honest.
Ooh, devastating.
That's the idea of an anthology, because an anthology, the ones that I've done, and I've done 7 or 8 now, have always been personal essay. And there's one hard and fast rule that I set for all the authors, whether they're Pulitzer Prize, New York Times bestsellers, whatever, it has to be true and it has to be verifiable. You cannot bring in a little bit of fiction to spice it up a bit. And they've always been extraordinary about following that. And Anne is right.
It's so much more interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, the responses...
No intrusive questions.
I'm sorry?
There were no intrusive questions. People were speaking from the heart because they wished to tell about it.
Yes, I mean, intrusive in the sense that I don't even ask them questions other than give them the parameters of the essay. But I had one author in my essay on faith who said to me, you do know that I don't believe in God. I don't believe in any of that. And in fact, in the last 60 years, I swear on God's green earth that I've never believed in it. And I said to her, do you realize what you've just said to me? She said, what? I said,
I could take a guess who that is.
But you're talking about God's green earth. And there was a silence. And all I heard her finally say was, oh dear. So if I could get an author in any subject, whether it was on infidelity or body image or aging, whatever, to step back and take a look at themselves a bit, because that's what you do with personal essay. You have to really go into your heart and your mind. And
when you learn everything I know about essays, which is not necessarily a lot, I've learned from Victoria. And I find that when I read other people's essays, I almost always end up liking them more.
Ooh, interesting. Why do you think that is, Anne?
Because there's an honesty, a vulnerability, and an ability to identify with people for the small details that they reveal.
But also their willingness to let people look at them in a way that it can be so close and so intimate that they might not have wanted them to do that, to show that part of themselves before. But all of a sudden they're willing. Don't you always like them more for knowing these things? Well, Anne, it's interesting because, I work closely with Anne with her novels. And one of the things that I do is I'm also her reader. So I will come back to her and say, I just love this scene. Do you want to show more? Do you want that character to give up more of what he or she is feeling? Or I'll say to her, is that giving up too much too early in terms of the arc of the character? But that whole thing about showing your feelings, putting your emotions out there. I think Anne is really amazing at that, because she doesn't even see it sometimes, but she'll have that one little phrase that just blows open the character of that character, that makes it compelling and makes you want to keep reading. Well, is anybody interesting who's invulnerable and who doesn't care about something? It can be the pet dog or whatever. But they might be interesting, but they certainly aren't very likable. No. The interesting part is why they don't want to give up that, why they're that way. People who are cruel can be very interesting if you take the time to look at why they're being cruel. And this is one of the things about Anne developing her characters. We're talking 110 novels that she's written, and every single time your characters have to be different. Or if you're doing the same characters in a series, there has to be that character arc that we talk about in writing, where at the beginning of the entire series, maybe 30 years ago, they were this way, but now they're like this. But you have to have that arc in every novel as well. And that's a story is change. There has to be change. I think without change, you've got no story. Right.
I love that. Well, let's get into all of the fabulous questions that are pouring in. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So we are broadcasting live to 6 destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So no matter where you're watching from, you are in the right place. This is the right time. And I'm thrilled to be hosting the incredible Anne Perry and Victoria Zackheim. So first, coming in from Stephanie, she said, wow, this is such a promising lineup. I'm so looking forward to this interview. She said, see, this is what happens to Kindle readers too. If you don't have the cover, you are lost. Talking about the transformation of your beautiful cover there, Anne. So I just want to let everyone know, if you're watching from a private Facebook group, you will be very mysterious unless you click enable privacy settings. So you can either stay mysterious. This is a mystery show after all, or you can click show, enable privacy, and we can see who you are. Someone would like to know, Anne, is 3 Debts Paid a standalone, or do they need to read the first books in the series first?
Both. You don't need to read the earlier books, but you've mentioned us in a series, which it is. It'll end,
this is number 5, right, in your Daniel Pitt series?
Yes.
I think so. I know I've written 6. But I don't title them because they always change it anyway.
Okay. So this is number 5. So it can be read as a standalone in answer to this mystery friends question. But it can also be read. Do you think there's benefit to reading the first 4 before you read this one, or just find a jump in anytime?
Well, it depends how heavy a reader you are, how much time you have. It'll stand alone.
Okay,
But we'll
great.
hope that you'll want to read the one after then.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you for the wonderful question and thanks for the answer. Leslie joining us from Canada, giving us her signature Canadian hello. Leslie, welcome to the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm scrolling through to make sure I don't miss anybody's. Stephanie saying, in response to Victoria, your story on faith there, I swear by God. Yup. Thank you for letting us know. Stephanie's saying this is so interesting just hearing from the two of you, really. Stephanie, I totally agree. So Victoria and Anne, tell us a little bit about how this collaboration, how this partnership works. What do you do if you disagree? If Anne says this has got to go in and Victoria said, I fell asleep in that scene, what do you do?
Rewrite it.
So Anne, Victoria's
If
the
I
boss.
can't hold Victoria's attention, I probably can't hold anybody's.
Okay,
I
has
might
that
think it's
happened?
good.
Has that happened to you?
Not quite that way, but very often she said you can do more with this scene or it's extraneous. To any writer, I would say a good editor will take out what is unnecessary. If you love the scene, put in something that makes it necessary. Otherwise, get rid of it.
And Victoria, what about from your side? When you get Anne's drafts, are you like, this has got to go, too much exposition, or is she pretty much to the bone? How is it from your side of the partnership?
More often than not, my response to her will be, I understand why this scene is here, but you need to clarify it. You need to make sure that we understand why it's there, or develop it a bit further so that we understand the continuity. Continuity for me is extraordinarily important. And so
it is to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't explain A, then there's just no reason to go to B because B will make no sense. With Anne, I actually edit her at several different levels. I edit the very first draft where she does not put in a lot of the sentient information, what the characters are seeing or smelling or feeling, the colors, the flowers. And of course, once she does that, that's where the poetry really kicks in with her work. That's why I consider her a mystery writer, yes, but I also consider it literary fiction. So I will say to her, like I just sent her a chapter last night, and I put it in a bracket. This is where you can tell us what she's saying, or this is where Margot needs to physically move to break up a bit of the dialogue, because Anne gets really into dialogue with the characters, and the dialogue is almost never extraneous. But I feel that as a reader, I'm happy reading a half a page of dialogue, but I want to see movement too, because when we're speaking, we're always moving our hands or our head or looking away. Our facial expressions say a lot about what the words actually mean. So you can say to somebody, I like you very much, he said, looking away quickly. That's a very different kind of an expression than I like you very much, he said, period. So those movements and expressions are really important. So my job with Anne is often to just say, movement required here.
Well, I'm right there. When I'm writing it, I'm there so much. I imagine everybody else can see what I can see in my head, which of course they can't.
Now, Anne, do you consider yourself a literary fiction writer? Do you consider yourself a mystery writer, or do you not care about labels? What's that like for you?
I would love to consider myself a literary writer, but somebody else has to say that, not me.
Well, Victoria just has, so good news. Now, when you receive because I'm the same way, I assume that everyone is in my head, picking up what I'm putting down. Now, when you get that feedback from Victoria that she needs more movement, are you able to, what do you do? Do you go back in your head, tune in a little more to what your character is feeling, thinking, seeing, and then try to deepen that? Or how do you do it?
I think we need to explain. My publisher's editor now says you will turn in a 10 to 15 page single-spaced outline before we begin. If you don't get paid. And I will talk with Victoria for ages with ideas and finally put it down, those 10 or 12, 15 pages.
Chapter by
And
chapter.
then she will give criticisms, and we have to change it at that point. If it's too dense or too spaced out or whatever. And then when I start to write it, I write by hand. And I had a very interesting conversation with somebody the other day who said, actually, there is evidence that it's better for your brain firing to work through a pen on paper than through a machine. So that justifies what I intend to do anyway.
I agree.
So
when you're writing that first draft, Anne, do you have a special pen? Do you have a special notebook? Do you have a special chair?
I have 144 special pens, and I go through them like a dose of salt.
And so you write it by longhand, every draft.
Yes. And it's barely legible.
Wow.
See, when Anne was let me just interject here, Anne. When she was living in Scotland, she had somebody who could transcribe for her. She would look at Anne's handwritten pages that were 60, 80 pages or more, and she would transcribe them into a Word document on the computer. But when Anne came to California, it changed because her transcriber was no longer there, and I can't read her handwriting, and Anne can't even read her own handwriting. So that's when she got the Yeti, and now she dictates every chapter into the computer through that dictation process. And I get the first draft, which is very funny because between her British accent and the fact that Yeti is a machine and not a person, some of the things that are transcribed into the Word document are hysterical. I mean, they're just
no idea what it can make of some proper names.
She has a character in her Daniel series named Dr. Evelyn Hall. And sometimes it'll come up as I've been living in hell. So, and I have to read it out loud and say, oh, it means Dr. Evelyn Hall. So I can make that change. But that's the first real challenge that we have, is trying to figure out, for her to go back and for me to say, okay, on page 3, what does this mean? And if it's just too much, I'll just highlight it in yellow and put it back up on OneDrive. And then she'll open it and she'll look at her own writing, the pages, she'll find it, and then she'll type in onto the Word document what she meant to say. But that
one that they did such a nonsense with, we pronounce what you call Evelyn as Evelyn. And I wondered what the evil in the hall was.
Or evil in hell.
Evil in, I love it.
Yes, evil in the hall.
But it happens. It comes up all the time, and sometimes it's funny, and sometimes it's just frustrating because you want to say to the machine, "Just get it right, so we can move forward." It takes an extra 10 hours of work,
but it does save me 8 hours of time.
And we have a question coming in from YouTube. This one from Carter, who would like to know, how long does it take from the approved initial outline, which you just gave us the inside scoop about, thank you, to your finished draft?
I don't have to wait for them to approve the outline. Thank goodness, because they could waste weeks.
Right.
About 4 or 5 months.
So you write the book, every book, in 4 to 5 months?
Well, the Christmas novellas in less, because I have to do 2 books of approximately 100,000 words, and the novella with 40,000 per year.
Wow,
you have a turn-in date.
So she does one Elena Standish novel, she does one Daniel Pitt novel, and one Christmas novella every year.
Now, Anne, in terms of, back to Carter's question, how long it takes you, are you like Dean Koontz at your desk working banker's hours from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.? Are you, sort of a nighttime owl, night owl?
I'm daytime.
And how long
do you
get up?
There? That's the first.
But
it depends on the day and other things I have to do.
At least 6 days a week.
Don't do each other. Do themselves.
But Sarah, she works 6 days a week. not bankers.
There's more than just writing. You
Wow.
do have to do some research. And if people write nice letters to you, you have to answer them. And you have to do the ordinary sort of cooking, cleaning, and not that I do that much of it, but it still has to be done.
Has to be done. Carter,
Yeah.
thank you for the great question. And Anne, thank you for the great answer. This one coming in from Stephanie. She says, I missed some opportunities in my life because no one told me there would be a job opportunity connected to my dreams. I would have wanted to be a continuity manager or someone in charge of fireworks. Stephanie, so true. So many of us don't believe that we can do what we believe we can do, or what we don't believe that it's possible to do what we want to do. So first, let's start with Anne and then over to Victoria. Anne, did you always know you wanted to be a writer, and did you feel empowered and supported to chase those dreams, or did you have to fight for it?
I was nearly 40 when I got my first manuscript accepted.
40?
I got paper the walls with rejection slips. No, you do your starving in a garret for a bit. And you do have to give up time you would spend on other things. But my first book is still in print. It came out in 79, I think.
All of her books are still in print.
And what about you, Victoria? Did you always want to be a writer? Did you feel empowered and supported to chase that dream, or did you have to fight for it?
You know, it's interesting because I started in college. I mean, I've always loved writing, even as a child. But when I started in college, I was pretty much dissuaded from the idea of being a writer because in those days, you know, girls studied things where they could make a living. So teaching was always the big deal. I managed to avoid that. And I got my master's in a whole other area in speech pathology. But I started writing later. And once I started, it was like something had just been freed inside of me. I'm probably a better editor than I am a writer. But the whole written word process for me is really wonderful. And I've just written a piece that's going to be in the San Francisco Writers Conference website and their blog coming up later this month, I think. And it's about older people and writing and how we hold ourselves back. And it's like, you know, what are we waiting for? But Anne, one of the questions I've worked with Anne many times in conferences on the stage, interviewing her. And I always ask the one question that I know the audience needs to hear, which is, was Cater Street Hangman, her first novel, your first novel that you wrote? And she always says, no, I wrote probably 10 novels before that never got published. So the next question is, what was it about Cater Street that publishers wanted to publish? And I'd like to throw that question to her right now because I think it's such an important question. It's yours, Anne.
Let's hear it.
It was the first mystery I wrote. Therefore, it had structure. Something bad happened. You had to discover what it was. And the story part is what people do and what they lie to defend themselves or others when you're investigated. We've all got secrets, even if they're just slightly embarrassing. For example, you have two sisters. Was your sister at the party? Do you know? Well, actually, she was off to the side flirting with somebody, but am I going to tell them that? Well, yes. Well, where was she? They know you're lying. Will you lie to protect those you love? Will you lie to inflict inquisition and embarrassment on those you don't like? You've got a perfect opportunity to implicate the man who rejected you. Are you going to take it or not? Your rival, you could be her only alibi. Are you going to give it or say, well, I'm not sure? It explores all sorts of things about people, possibly related to the crime, possibly not. There you've got 10 stories right away.
Ooh, tasty. Thank you for that. Carter has a follow-up question. I love this. Would like to know, Anne, writing all of those books per year, how do you keep the different plot lines for all the different series straight in your head?
I don't know that I have done. I've got very good editors who tell me.
You've got an editor.
But characters have to progress.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Anne.
Characters have to progress. Story is change. If something dramatic happens in your life and it doesn't change you, either there's something wrong with you or there's something that the writer missed.
And Anne, I think that he's also asking about the fact that having written so many novels, is it hard for you when you jump, like, four novels later, that you might accidentally start to think of the same plot line you've already used? So
how do you tell me, I hope?
How do you keep them straight?
I trust to luck and to the many people through whose hands it will go.
Exactly.
The outline will be detailed if it's, say, 15 pages, single-spaced. And that's when you make changes. But there's always some new thing you want to address, some problem. For example, there was a time when we in Britain and you here were having a general election. And you listen to the competitors going around and saying, this is what I'm going to do, I believe so-and-so. And then something happens and they change their minds and say, oh, I will do the opposite. And their faithful wives are going around, oh, yes, yes, yes. And I thought, well, what would happen if she said, well, I believe what you said yesterday, not today? There'd be hell to pay. Yes. You betrayed me. No, yes. I stayed true to what you said.
But in a mystery, isn't there always some kind of betrayal?
Yes, I suppose they are. But there's so much in human behavior, in political situations, social situations, you don't need to repeat yourself. And there are social ills that, you see, just for example, if you make prostitution illegal, you don't do away with it. You just put it under wraps where you can't reach it to keep any check on health. I mean, it's more complicated than just legislate this or legislate that.
It's the same thing with writing too, and to keep one. I mean, Anne has the great fortune, and of course she's earned it over the years. She has two amazing agents, and both of them happen to be gifted editors. So when she sends her, and they read the outline before it goes to Random House. And so they'll come back and say, Anne, in the outline on chapter 3, what about this? And in chapter 7, what if you did this? And have you thought about adding this thread to the story? Because if you're going to add a plot or a character, you want to do it before you start writing. Because once you start writing, I'll say it to Anne when she's in chapter 7, have you thought of this plot possibility? And oh God, okay, let me finish writing the entire novel first. Then I'll go back to the beginning and see if that plot line if that thread will fit into it.
Rewriting. Don't you wish you could rewrite your life sometimes, or bits of it?
A lot of
or
people
just what you said yesterday. Well, if it's a book, you can. But don't be too proud to accept a good suggestion from somebody else.
Absolutely.
Ooh, I love that. Margaret Pinard joining us from Portland saying, oh my goodness, is this the Anne Perry? Absolutely amazing. Yes, Margaret, this is the Anne Perry. Welcome to the conversation, ma'am. Stephanie saying, we all have our secrets. The base secret to writing a really great story. It's the dark place in the Gamache novels.
Gamache, yeah. That's
Gamache.
Love that. Carter has another. Good question, Carter. Thank you for this one. He would like to know, have you returned to any of those previously rejected 10 novels pre-Cater Street, revised them, and subsequently had them published, Anne?
Only one I can think of.
Which one was it?
It's a fantasy. It's called Tathea.
Wow.
Because none of the ones that I wrote before and were rejected were mysteries.
Wow.
It was this happened and then that happened and then that happened. Well, that's not a story. This happened, which caused this to happen. So people then had to do that. Each action must be forced upon them by the original, so that it all hangs together.
Anne has a
No
saying.
coincidences.
She has a saying that if you walk into a room and there's a gun on the table, you better use that gun or make it part of the story. Otherwise, why mention it? And I find with my students in my writing classes, they will often state something and then move on, but it'll have no connection other than they thought it was a great idea, so they threw it in. And I've said to them, every sentence must lead to the next sentence, which leads to the next paragraph. Everything has to have its continuity. Without continuity, you're lost. You're lost. I mean, you've read books where
we don't know a character.
Right.
If they don't react. And somebody who doesn't care about any, I mean, even if it's only the cat, you know, the old saying, save the cat?
Yes.
Yes, well, you've got to care about something. If you don't care, why should we care about you? How can we identify with you if you're invulnerable?
The other thing too is you have to know your characters. You can't start writing a novel without knowing who your characters are. I mean, really in depth who they are. I would guess that I've probably edited, what would you say, Anne? 10 of your novels and 5 or 6 of your novellas. And I would guess in those hundreds and hundreds of thousands of words that I might have written 3 times in the margin, is this out of character? Because Anne spends so much time developing character and plot before she writes the first word of the novel, which not only facilitates the writing for her, but she doesn't have to guess when she's writing. She knows how Elena will respond if something like that is said to her, or how her sister Margot would respond if the exact same thing were said to her. They would respond in very different ways because they're such different women. So
the thing my British agent writes in the margin, 2 things. One, a little skull and crossbones, because it's out of its time period. But more often, why? Why did this person do that?
Exactly.
Everybody's got to have a reason, or it doesn't make any sense.
That's right.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
It's a good thing to remember. Everybody does something for some reason.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Margaret saying, this resonates. I have to finish this bad draft before I can entertain another idea. Laughing out loud. Absolutely. She adds that she is a huge fan of the William Monk series, making her way through hoarding the books to prolong the pleasure of reading them. Margaret,
bless you.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Margaret is an amazing writer herself. I happen to know her in real life, and who also writes.
This is real?
Yes. Writes historical British and Scottish fiction as well.
Margaret, you need to know that one of Anne's Christmas novellas coming out is based on some of the monk characters, the young men. So keep your eyes open.
Keep your eyes peeled, Margaret. You heard
go
it
to my website and email me, and I'll give you the name of it so you can look for it.
You heard it here first on Mystery and Thriller Mavens, everybody. Stephanie adding Inspector Gamache, Louise Penny. Yes. Margaret saying a skull and crossbones for an anachronism. Ha. I loved that too. Stephanie saying, as a reader, I want you to tell me something new about your main character within the first 1,000 words of a new installment of a series. Margaret saying she cannot wait for the new monk-related book, Victoria and Anne.
Oh, you're referring to the Christmas novella.
Sorry, the Christmas novella.
Yes. I got the British cover today.
Oh, how wonderful. We can't wait to see it.
They also have a kitten right in the front.
Ooh.
Well, the American one has a little girl with a kitten.
And Margaret is saying she will be reaching out to you to hear more about that, Victoria. Thank you. Y'all, I want to remind you that 3 Debts Paid is out tomorrow. So pre-order today and get the good folks at Murder by the Book will get that out to you tomorrow. So here I am popping the link in the comments so that you can pre-order 3 Debts Paid by Anne Perry. I'm trying to make sure my ring lights and the beautiful afternoon light streaming in is not reflecting off this gorgeous cover, but here it is. The link is now in the comments. So pre-order it today and you will get shipped to tomorrow. And then you can delve into Daniel Pitt #5, drinking in all the deliciousness.
Just be glad you don't live in that climate.
I live in Boston, so it's one step worse, I think. Margaret saying, thank you for all the cat people for that cover. Not Sarah. She's a dog person. Margaret, I like cats too, but I am team dog. All right. We have 5 minutes left with Anne and Margaret. So I think we can take a couple more questions. So get them going in the comments. Anything you want to ask these two incredibly accomplished writers. Anne has gotten so many amazing words of praise for all of her books: Historical Novel Society, raving about Death with a Double Edge. I have so many reviews here. A veritable page turner. Perry is a skilled craftsperson and delivers an exciting and satisfying resolution. So let's pause on your ability to do that. And
Sarah, may I put forth a question for Anne?
Right after I finish this question. So, Anne, let's talk right after I finish this question. So let's talk about your ability to craft a page turner. So, Anne, you're a legend. What do you think are the most important tools in delivering an exciting, satisfying resolution and keeps those pages flying? How do you do it from a craft perspective?
Well, there has to be tension in every scene, and you have to have characters. You understand what they want and why. And I mean, money's very boring if it's nothing just for itself. They must care about somebody who must be endangered by something. And listen to your critics who are honest.
So when you are to effectively create that tension that you're telling us is so key as a writer, and for me as a reader and all of us as a reader, the way to do that is to give them something to care about and something to fight for. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, Carter has one more question too. And do you think you'll ever start another series?
Well, if I'm not asked for an Elena or a Daniel, I'll have to. But I've got a long way to go with Elena yet. We're only in sort of 34, 35. I'm allowed to go right up to 39.
Why do you have to stop at 39?
Because the war. She told me not to go into the war again. I've got 5 books that are set in World War I, and I guess I've run out of war.
Interesting. Okay, Victoria, over to you for your question.
I actually wanted Anne to tell you about the first time she ever got paid for writing.
Ooh, let's hear it.
I haven't asked you this for a very long time because we haven't done a conference for a very long time.
Yes. I was a very little girl going to school, about 4.5, and it was a mile across Blackheath, and it was perfectly safe to send a 4-year-old out at that time. And I was dressed up in a pink and white checked smock, hand embroidered across the top, and Mary Jane shoes, and I had real yellow hair and blue eyes and looked as if butter wouldn't melt in my mouth. And I had 6pence that I hadn't spent on lunch. And I was walking back home, and this big young boy, he was probably my height now, but he seemed to me very big. And he had rimless glasses on, and he had a big stick, and he threatened me to give him up my 6pence. And I don't know where I got the idea, but I told him that we were very, very poor. We didn't have any food. We barely had any clothes. I was dressed up like Junior Vogue. And anyway, he saw this, child, a poor little thing, and he gave me ½ a crown, which is 5 times 6pence. So I went home with 3 shillings. But
so
I didn't get anything. I had to work to expiate that sin. I don't know why I told him such a silly story.
To save your arse. So he
So,
wouldn't hit
and
you.
an attempted mugger tried to mug you with a stick, and not only did you successfully ward off the mugging, but you extorted money from the
Yes.
attacker.
And
Well done.
I was about 30 years odd before I ever earned any more money.
Wow.
For telling stories.
Yes. Well, I love that story. Jillian, welcome to the conversation, saying what a privilege to sit and listen to these two play with each other. Jillian, I could not agree more. Thank you so much for that lovely comment and for joining us here today. Margaret saying,
thank you, love, Jillian, for joining us. She's a dear friend.
Jillian saying, one book per year does run up to the war. I've always wondered how Anne decided how much time to pass between books, something less than a year, it seemed. Anne, what about that?
You mean and the events in the life of the character?
Yes.
Well, I want to write a lot about them. And my editor said, please don't get as far as the war. So we're going to have to do a fit in as much as possible between, I think it's 1911 or 12, I am with Daniel, before 1914. And Elena, I think I'm up to 20.
30. You started at 33, I think.
No, 30. 30 something, 33, 34. And I've only got until 39.
Wow.
But,
okay.
I'm put in super living. Besides, but particularly in the 30s, something major was happening every other month.
But don't forget, too, you had a whole series, a 5-book series of World War I that wasn't Daniel or Elena. That's a wonderful series. And some people
cared about that very, very much.
Yeah. And it's very...
I think, in a way, it's the best thing I've written.
Well, I think also she based the main character off of her own grandfather, who was a chaplain in the trenches during World War I. And this chaplain,
I never knew him.
He's the one who solves the murders through the five.
I'll tell you, odd coincidence. I made Joseph, who was my grandfather. He's got the name he really had, Joseph Reevely. And I made it gave him a life-sized bust head drawing of Dante, of the Inferno. And I told my mother about that. The one thing he kept no matter what. And she said, how did you know? I said, know what? She said, that he carried a head of Dante with him.
Oh my God.
For real.
That's crazy. What are the chances?
I never knew him. He died before my parents even met each other.
Oh my God.
But I've always had a special feeling for him.
Apparently, he was guiding you from the great beyond. Margaret is saying she is scampering off to find this World War I 5-book series. Margaret, I hope
you enjoy it, because my heart's in that a lot.
Stephanie's saying, and this is where all the drama comes from, being able to retell little scenes from long lost times. Absolutely. I love that, Stephanie.
And why people cared just as we would.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As Stephanie's saying, she's clarifying that there should a typo before. Stephanie, we knew what you meant. No problem at all. Y'all, I want to remind you that Anne's book, 3 Debts Paid, is out tomorrow. Grab your copy today. The link is in the comments. And also Victoria's anthology, Private Investigations, is out. Here's the link to that. You are not going to want to miss out on these 20 mystery writers spilling all, dishing the dirt, spilling the tea, as the cool kids say. So grab it now. You will want to do that. Victoria, Jillian is saying, would the pair of you please come to Portland and run a workshop for those of us memoir writers who just can't free their imaginations to create fiction? Please, will you do that?
Victoria could do that very well without me.
Victoria,
I learned from her on that subject.
I think we should have a road trip, Victoria and Anne's Great Adventure. I selflessly offer to come along and video it. This sounds like it could be great fun. Y'all, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining me with these two incredible writers, the legendary Anne Perry, giving us the inside scoop on 3 Debts Paid, Daniel Pitt number 5, out tomorrow. Link in the comments. Pre-order it now. Victoria Zackheim, author most recently of Private Investigations, 20 mystery authors spilling the tea on all things secret and mysterious in their lives. Oh, Margaret would like to know Portland, Oregon or Portland, Maine?
Oregon.
Oh, Oregon, I think, definitely.
Yes.
Maine's too far away.
I vote for Maine, but I'm in Boston, so I'm
Hey,
biased.
Fly us to Maine. We're there.
Margaret clarifies she is in Portland. She's voting for that. This has been so much fun. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for all of your great questions. Thank you, Anne and Victoria, for all of your wonderful time. Hang on just a second while I log us off. Y'all, I'll see you tonight at 7 and 8 with Sally Hepworth and Erica Forensic. See you then on #Mystery Monday, because you know Mondays can be murder.